High Commander stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Silence, and watched the stars drift past the viewport. His gray skin reflected the cold light of distant suns. His 4 eyes, each one capable of seeing different spectrums of light, focused on a small blue dot in the distance. Earth, a world so unremarkable that his analysts had almost skipped it entirely. The Dominion had conquered 17 star systems in the past 1,000 years. Himself had led the subjugation of 3 worlds, each one falling within days of the first bombardment. The pattern was always the same: arrive with overwhelming force, destroy communication networks, eliminate military targets, wait for surrender. It never took long. Species that had not yet developed faster-than-light travel were always easy. They looked up at the sky, saw the massive warships blocking out their sun, and they understood. Resistance was mathematical impossibility. Pulled up the data file on Earth again. His subordinates had prepared a thorough analysis. The planet was rich in water and minerals. Its atmosphere was breathable for most Dominion species. Its dominant life form, called humans, had achieved basic space flight but nothing more. They had sent primitive probes to nearby planets. They had placed crude satellites in orbit around their world. They had not yet left their own solar system. What caught attention, though only for a moment, was a footnote in the report. The humans had, at some point in their recent history, developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization. Nuclear devices, the report called them. And they had actually used these weapons, on themselves, against their own kind. Had read that detail 3 times before he understood it correctly. These creatures had built weapons of mass destruction and then detonated them on their own planet. Not once, but twice. And then they had built thousands more. His second-in-command, sub-commander, had noticed his pause. She was young for her rank, ambitious and clever, with pale blue skin that marked her as coming from one of the Dominion's outer colonies. "Something concerns you, High Commander?" she asked. "Close the file." "No, nothing. It is merely unusual. Most species we encounter have not yet discovered how to split the atom. These humans figured it out and immediately tried to kill each other with it." Made a sound that was the equivalent of a shrug. Barbaric but useful. Aggressive species make better labor stock. They work harder. They survive longer in the mining colonies. This was true. The Dominion did not conquer worlds for the joy of conquest. They needed resources. They needed bodies. The crucible war against the hegemony had been raging for 300 years, and it showed no signs of ending. They were powerful, numerous, and stubborn. Every year, the Dominion lost thousands of soldiers to their attacks. Every year, the war councils demanded more troops, more ships, more weapons. Earth would provide fresh labor. Its humans would work in the mines. The strongest ones might be trained as auxiliary soldiers, expendable troops to hold defensive lines while the real forces struck at enemy positions. This was how it had always been done. Conquered species served the Dominion. This was the natural order of things. Gave the order. Standard subjugation protocol. 1 fleet, 30 warships, 500 ground assault vehicles, 10,000 soldiers. More than enough for a world that had never seen alien life before. The fleet entered Earth's solar system 3 days later. They passed the outer planets without slowing down. They ignored the primitive signals coming from various human installations throughout the system. These were merely noise, the confused chatter of a species about to have its entire understanding of the universe shattered. When the fleet achieved orbit around Earth, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Below him, 7 billion humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. Some of them were probably looking up at the night sky right now, wondering if they were alone in the universe. They were about to find out. The bombardment began at dawn over the planet's largest continent, had studied human civilization enough to know where their power centers were located, their communication networks, their military bases, their centers of government. He targeted all of them simultaneously. Bright lances of plasma fell from the sky like rain made of fire. Cities vanished in the time it took to draw a breath. Millions died in the first hour. This was not cruelty, this was efficiency. Terror was a tool, nothing more. When a species witnessed the complete destruction of everything they thought made them powerful, they lost the will to fight. They surrendered. They begged for mercy. They became compliant. Had seen it happen 17 times before. He expected to see it happen again. He waited for the surrender transmissions to begin. The flagship's communication officers monitored all frequencies, ready to receive the inevitable pleas for peace. The humans would contact them soon. They would offer anything, everything, in exchange for the bombardment stopping. This was how it always went. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 6. The communication officers reported nothing. No surrender requests, no attempts at negotiation, no begging. The human transmissions had gone dark, silent, as if the entire species had simply stopped talking. Suggested that perhaps they had destroyed the humans' ability to communicate entirely. Perhaps there was no one left who could send a message, but the sensors told a different story. The humans were alive down there, billions of them. Their infrastructure was damaged but not destroyed. They still had power in many regions. They still had the ability to transmit. They were choosing not to. Felt something unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it as uncertainty. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to orbital bombardment with silence. They screamed. They begged. They offered everything they had, but they did not go quiet. He ordered the ground forces to deploy. Perhaps the humans needed a more personal demonstration of power. Perhaps they needed to see soldiers in their streets, weapons pointed at their heads, before they understood their situation. The first descended through Earth's atmosphere, carrying the finest soldiers the Dominion had to offer. They were equipped with plasma rifles, energy shields, and armor that could stop any projectile weapon the humans possessed. Watched them go with confidence. This was a minor setback, nothing more. The humans would break. They always did. He did not yet understand that silence was not surrender. It was preparation. The first ground assault battalion landed in what the humans called Europe. 3,000 soldiers in heavy armor supported by hover tanks and aerial drones. Their commander, battalion leader, had conquered 2 worlds before this one. He expected the operation to last 3 days at most. Secure the major population centers, round up the survivors, establish control. Simple. The touchdown in an open field outside a ruined city. Smoke still rose from the bombardment craters. The air smelled like burning. Stepped out of his transport and surveyed the landscape with all 4 of his eyes. Nothing moved. The city appeared empty. Perhaps the humans had fled. He ordered his troops to advance. They made it 200 meters before the first explosion. The blast came from beneath the ground. Someone had buried a bomb in the road, right where the column would pass. The explosion tore through the first hover tank, killing the crew instantly. Barely had time to process what had happened before the gunfire started. It came from everywhere, from the ruined buildings, from holes in the ground, from piles of rubble that had seemed like nothing at all. The humans had been waiting. They had watched the land. They had let the advance into their trap, and now they were attacking. Shouted orders into his communicator. Return fire, find cover, locate the enemy positions, but his soldiers were already dying. The humans were using primitive projectile weapons, metal slugs fired at high velocity. These should not have been a threat. Armor was designed to stop such things. But the humans had learned something in the 72 hours since the bombardment began. They had studied the soldiers who had died in the initial chaos. They had examined the armor. They had found the weak points. And now they were aiming for those weak points with terrible precision. A soldier fell beside, shot through the gap between his helmet and his chest plate. Another went down, hit in the joint where his arm met his shoulder. These were not lucky shots. These were aimed, calculated. The humans had figured out how to kill in 3 days. Ordered a retreat. His battalion had lost 200 soldiers in 10 minutes. They fell back to the, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. The humans did not pursue. They simply melted back into the ruins, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. This scene repeated itself across the planet. In the land called Asia, a supply convoy was ambushed by humans using captured plasma rifles. Somehow, they had figured out how to operate the weapons. They had taken them from dead soldiers and learned to fire them in hours. The convoy was destroyed completely. In the land called Africa, humans attacked a forward base using vehicles loaded with explosives. They drove these vehicles directly into the base's walls and detonated them. The drivers did not try to escape. They died with their hands on the controls. The base commander reported with obvious confusion that the human attackers had been smiling. In the land called North America, what remained of the human military launched a coordinated strike against a landing zone. They used missiles, artillery, aircraft, and ground troops all at once. The attack should have been easy to defeat. They had better weapons, better armor, better technology. But the humans did not fight like a military force. They fought like animals. They used their own dead as cover. They advanced into plasma fire without hesitation. They kept coming even when they were wounded, even when they were dying. The landing zone fell. 6,000 soldiers were killed. The humans captured 3 and began taking them apart, studying every component, learning how they worked. High Commander received these reports with growing alarm. He had expected resistance. All species resisted at first, but this was something different. This was not resistance. This was adaptation. The humans were learning. Every battle, every skirmish, every dead soldier taught them something new. They shared information across their entire planet. A weakness discovered in Europe was exploited in Asia within hours. A tactic that worked in Africa was being used in South America by the next day. They had no unified command, no central government anymore, but somehow they were coordinating. Increase the bombardment. He targeted human population centers, human food supplies, human water sources. He tried to break them through starvation and terror. It did not work. The humans simply scattered into smaller groups. They hid in mountains, in forests, in underground tunnels. They could not be found. They could not be cornered, and they never stopped attacking. 6 months passed. The conquest that was supposed to take 2 weeks was nowhere near complete, had lost 30,000 soldiers. His automated weapons platforms, the pride of military engineering, were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. The humans had learned to identify their sensor blind spots. They had learned to trick their targeting systems. They had learned to turn the Dominion's own technology against it. One report disturbed more than any other. A human prisoner captured during a raid had been interrogated by intelligence officers. They had asked him why the humans continued to fight. They had explained, carefully and logically, that resistance was pointless. The Dominion controlled space. The Dominion had unlimited resources. The humans could not win. The prisoner had laughed. He had told them that humans did not fight because they thought they could win. They fought because fighting was what they did. They had been fighting since they climbed down from the trees. They had fought each other over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. War was not something humans did to survive. War was what humans were. Then he had done something the interrogators did not expect. He had bitten through his own tongue and bled to death rather than answer more questions. Read that report several times. He thought about the atomic weapons the humans had built. He thought about the soldiers who drove bombs into walls. He thought about the prisoner who chose death over capture. He began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. He had thought the humans were like other species, soft creatures who built civilizations to escape the danger of nature, beings who wanted peace and comfort and safety. The humans were not like that at all. They were something else entirely, and now had to figure out what to do about it. 2 years after the invasion began, Earth was still not conquered. The war had settled into a bloody stalemate. They controlled the skis. Their ships orbited the planet unchallenged. They could bombard any location they wished. But the ground belonged to the humans. Every city, every town, every stretch of wilderness had become a death trap for soldiers. The Dominion held a few fortified bases, surrounded by walls and energy shields, and they did not dare venture far from them. Stood before the War Council on the Dominion's capital world, explaining his failure. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from a dozen conquered species, all of them serving their masters. The High Lords of the Dominion sat on elevated platforms, looking down with cold disapproval. "You were given sufficient forces," High Lord said. His voice was like grinding stones. "You were given the finest weapons in the Dominion, and yet a primitive species with projectile weapons has held you at bay for 2 years." Kept his expression neutral. "The humans are not what we expected, High Lord. They do not respond to standard subjugation protocols. They do not surrender when faced with superior force. They adapt faster than any species we have encountered." "Then adapt faster than they do," another High Lord said, "or glass the planet and be done with it." This was the option that had been discussed many times. The Dominion could reduce Earth to molten rock. They had the firepower. They had the will. One order and every human would be dead within hours. But had argued against this option, and he argued against it now. The planet is rich in resources. More importantly, the humans themselves are a resource. We came to Earth seeking labor stock for the Crucible War. If we destroy them, we gain nothing. "We gain nothing by losing soldiers to them either," High Lord replied. The debate continued for hours. Listened as the High Lords discussed options, argued with each other, and proposed increasingly desperate solutions. None of them were willing to admit what had already accepted. The humans could not be conquered, not through force, not through terror, not through any method the Dominion had ever used. It was Sub-Commander who finally spoke the idea that would change everything. She had been standing behind, silent and observant, as was proper for her rank. But when the debate seemed to reach its end, she stepped forward and requested permission to address the council. Was surprised. It was unusual for someone of her position to speak in this chamber. High Lord granted her permission, more out of curiosity than anything else. Spoke clearly and without hesitation. "The Crucible War is bleeding us dry. They have held their territory for 3 centuries. We have thrown our best weapons against them, our finest soldiers, our most advanced technology, and still they hold. We need something different, something they have never faced before." "What are you suggesting?" asked. The humans said, "Not as slaves, not as labor stock, as soldiers, as allies." The chamber went silent. Several of the High Lords looked at each other in confusion. One of them laughed. Another demanded that be removed from the chamber for insulting their intelligence. But High Lord raised a hand for silence. "Explain." Took a breath. "We have spent 2 years trying to break the humans. We have failed, but in that time I have studied them. I have read every report, every analysis, every interrogation transcript, and I have realized something. The humans are not good at building empires. They are not good at maintaining peace. They are not good at the things that make civilizations last, but they are very, very good at one thing." She paused. "They are good at war." "All species fight," a High Lord said dismissively. "Not like this," replied. "Most species fight to survive. They fight when they must and they stop when they can. The humans are different. They fight because they enjoy it. They have spent their entire history perfecting the art of killing each other. They have developed more ways to cause death than any species in our records, and they never stop improving." She pulled up data on the chamber's display screens. Images of human weapons throughout history, swords and spears, guns and bombs, chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. The progression was startling. No other species had devoted so much creativity to the development of violence. They have never faced anything like this, continued. Their tactics are based on fighting species that want to survive, species that will retreat when the cost becomes too high, species that will surrender when defeat is certain. The humans do not do these things. They attack when they should defend. They advance when they should retreat. They die laughing. They will not know how to respond. High Lord considered this for a long moment. You are suggesting we ally with a species we have been trying to conquer, that we offer them partnership instead of subjugation. Yes. They will never accept. We killed millions of them. We destroyed their cities. They hate us. Smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind that rarely showed. They do hate us, but I have learned something else about humans in these 2 years. They hate many things. They hate each other. They hate their enemies. But hatred does not stop them from making deals. They call it pragmatism. If we offer them something they want, something they value more than revenge, they will negotiate. And what do humans value? The stars said. They have always looked up at the sky and wanted to reach it. They built ships to leave their planet. They sent messages into the void, hoping someone would answer. They dream of spreading across the galaxy. We can give them that. Technology, star charts, a place in the galactic order. In exchange, they fight for us. The council debated for 3 more days. Many of the High Lords found the idea repugnant. Species were tools or obstacles. They were not partners. But the Crucible War had been going badly for decades, and desperation makes strange things seem reasonable. In the end, they agreed to try. Returned to Earth with a very different mission. He was no longer there to conquer. He was there to negotiate. His communication officers transmitted a simple message on all frequencies, in all human languages. We wish to discuss terms. The response came within an hour. A human voice, speaking the language with an accent that suggested they had learned it from captured soldiers. We're listening. Explained the offer. Technology, knowledge, a seat at the galactic table. In exchange, humans would fight alongside the Dominion against their enemies. There was a pause, then the human voice spoke again. Send us the coordinates of your enemy. We'll think about it. Sent the coordinates. 3 days later, the humans accepted. They did not know it yet, but they had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The cluster had been territory for 90 years. 3 fortress stations orbited the cluster's primary planet, each one bristling with weapons, shields, and defensive systems. They had tried to take the cluster 7 times. 7 times they had failed. They were patient defenders. They knew how to wait behind their walls. They knew how to make attackers pay for every meter of space. When intelligence reported that a new assault force was approaching, they prepared for the same battle they had fought before. More ships, more automated weapons platforms, more of the same. They did not know about the humans. The first human soldiers arrived in transport ships, 10,000 of them, volunteers from Earth, equipped with armor and weapons. They had spent 6 months training with their new equipment, learning how plasma rifles worked, learning how to operate in zero gravity, learning how to fight in space. Commanders looked at them with doubt. These were the creatures who had caused so much trouble on Earth, but they seemed small now, fragile. Their bodies were soft, their short, their technology primitive. How could they possibly make a difference against the Dominion's plan was simple. The humans would go first. They would absorb the initial fire. They would die in large numbers. And while they were busy killing them, the real forces would strike at the weak points in the enemy defense. The humans were told this plan. Their commander, a woman named General, listened to the briefing without expression. When the strategist finished explaining, she asked one question. Which fortress do you want us to take first? The strategist blinked all 4 of his eyes. Take. You misunderstand. Your role is to engage the enemy defenses while we didn't come here to be shields, said. We came here to fight. Point us at the target and get out of the way. The commanders did not know what to do with this. They had never encountered soldiers who demanded to be sent into greater danger. After some discussion, they agreed to let the humans lead the assault on the smallest fortress station. It was a test. They expected the humans to fail, to die, to demonstrate that they were nothing special after all. The assault began at what the humans called 600 hours. Ships provided covering fire as human landing craft approached the fortress. They responded with their usual precision. Defensive turrets opened fire. Missiles streaked through space. The first wave of landing craft was supposed to be destroyed almost entirely. This was expected. This was the cost of attacking a fortress. But the humans did something they did not expect. Instead of trying to avoid the defensive fire, they flew directly into it. Their landing craft were not trying to survive. They were trying to reach the fortress walls, and many of them did. The craft that made it crashed into the fortress hull. They did not try to dock. They did not try to find airlocks. They simply hit the station at full speed and let their soldiers pour out through the wreckage. The humans were wearing sealed armor. They could survive in vacuum, and they did not seem to care about dying. Defenders rushed to repel the boarding parties. They were excellent soldiers, trained and disciplined, confident in their abilities. They had defeated boarders many times before. They had never fought humans. The first squad to engage the humans reported contact and then went silent. The second squad reported the same. The third squad managed to transmit a partial message before their channel cut out. The message was only 3 words. They keep coming. Inside the fortress, the battle became chaos. The humans did not fight the way they expected. They did not advance in formations. They did not hold defensive positions. They swarmed. They adapted. They found paths through the station that they had thought were too small, too dangerous, too impractical. A human sergeant named led his squad through a maintenance shaft that was barely wide enough to crawl through. They had never considered defending it because no rational soldier would use it. The shaft led directly to the station's shield generator, and his squad destroyed it with grenades and then died fighting the security team that responded. But the shields were down. Another human unit found the station's ammunition storage and detonated it from inside. They knew they would not survive the explosion. They did it anyway. General led the main assault on the command center. They had fortified it heavily. They had plasma turrets, energy barriers, and 100 of their best soldiers. They expected the humans to try a frontal assault and be cut down. Did not do a frontal assault. She did something they had never seen before. She talked. Using a translator device, she broadcast a message to the defenders. She told them what had happened to the shield generator. She told them what had happened to the ammunition storage. She told them that reinforcements were not coming because the other 2 fortresses were under attack as well. She described, in calm and specific detail, what the humans would do to them when they broke through. Then she asked if anyone wanted to surrender. 2 did. They opened a side door, hopping to escape the coming slaughter. Soldiers were waiting on the other side. The command center fell in 20 minutes. The station commander died with a human knife in his throat. The observers who witnessed the battle reported that the human who killed him, a young soldier no more than 20 years old, had been smiling. The first fortress fell in 6 hours. The second fortress fell the next day. The third fortress surrendered without a fight. The garrison commander had heard what happened at the first 2 stations. He had heard about the humans. He did not want to experience them himself. The cluster, which had resisted conquest for 90 years, fell in 3 weeks. High Commander received the reports with a strange feeling in his chest. He had seen many victories in his long career. He had watched automated weapons platforms destroy enemy fleets. He had seen orbital bombardments reduce cities to ash. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans had not just won. They had terrified the enemy. The in the cluster were not just defeated. They were broken. They sent messages to their warning them about what was coming. They described the humans as demons, as monsters, as something from their oldest nightmares. Watched a recording from one of the fortress battles. A human soldier, wounded and bleeding, had crawled across the floor to reach a fallen that was already dead, but the human did not know that. He had wanted to kill one more enemy before he died. He had been laughing the whole time. Turned off the recording. He understood now what the humans were. He understood why they had been so hard to conquer. He understood why they had agreed to fight for the Dominion so easily. They had not agreed because they needed the technology. They had not agreed because they wanted a seat at the galactic table. They had agreed because someone had offered them a war. And humans loved war more than anything else in the universe. The Crucible War ended in the 10th year of human involvement. It did not end with a great battle. It did not end with a final victory. It ended with a transmission from the broadcast on all frequencies, received by every ship in the galaxy. The hegemony was requesting terms of surrender. High Commander, now Supreme Commander of all Dominion forces, received the transmission on his flagship. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. They had fought for 300 years. They had endured orbital bombardments, siege warfare, biological attacks, and the loss of dozens of worlds. They had never once considered surrender. Now they were begging for it. The transmission included a personal message from Admiral, the highest-ranking military commander, had faced her across a dozen battlefields. He had respected her as an enemy. She was brilliant, patient, and utterly devoted to her people. Her message was short. It said, "We did not understand what you had found. We did not know what they were. We thought they were your weapons, but weapons do not laugh. Weapons do not learn. Weapons do not enjoy the hunt. You have not deployed a species. You have unleashed something else entirely. End this, please, before they reach our nursery worlds." Granted the surrender. The hegemony, which had stood for 2,000 years, became a subject state of the Dominion. Their fleets were disbanded. Their fortress stations were occupied. Their leaders knelt before the High Lords and pledged eternal loyalty. It should have been the greatest triumph in history. The war that had consumed their civilization for 3 centuries was finally over. They had won. But did not feel triumphant. He felt something else. Something he had not felt since those first days on Earth, when the humans had gone silent instead of surrendering. He felt afraid. The humans had changed in the 10 years since they joined the Dominion. They had grown. They had spread. Earth was no longer their only world. The Dominion had given them colony ships as payment for their service, and they had used those ships to claim dozens of planets. Human cities rose on worlds that had never known life before. Human children were born under alien suns. And they had not stopped fighting. Even now, with the defeated, the humans were asking questions. They wanted to know about other hostile species. They wanted star charts showing unexplored regions. They wanted information about potential enemies. Their military academies were graduating thousands of new soldiers every year. Their factories were building ships and weapons at a rate that made industrial planners nervous. They were not preparing to defend themselves. They were preparing to attack. Requested a meeting with General. She was older now, her black hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, hungry, alive with something that they did not have a word for. The war is over, told her. They have surrendered. There is no enemy left to fight. Smiled. It was the same smile he had seen on the face of that young soldier in the fortress recording, all those years ago. "There's always someone to fight," she said. "We've studied your records. The Dominion has been at peace with the Confederacy for 500 years, but they control 17 resource-rich systems along your border, systems you've always wanted. We have treaties with the we have agreements. Agreements can be broken, leaned forward. We've also noticed the Dominion's expansion has slowed in the past century. You've stopped conquering new territory. Your population is stable. Your economy is stagnant. You've become comfortable. We are at peace, said. This is what peace looks like. To you, maybe. Stood up and walked to the viewport of his office. She looked out at the stars, the same way had looked at Earth so many years ago. To us, peace is just the time between wars, the time when you get ready for the next fight. She turned back to him. You found us because you needed soldiers, expendable bodies to throw at your enemies, but we're not expendable anymore, are we? We've proven ourselves, we've earned our place, and now we want more. More what? More everything, more worlds, more resources, more challenges. Her smile grew wider. More enemies. Understood then what he had done, what the Dominion had done. They had spent developing the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, automated platforms that could destroy entire fleets, bombardment systems that could reduce planets to ash. They had believed that removing living beings from warfare made them stronger. They had believed that machines were the future. But machines did not adapt. Machines did not improvise. Machines did not look at an impossible fortress and find a way through its walls using nothing but courage and creativity. Machines did not want to fight. The humans did. They had built weapons. The humans had become weapons. Every cell in their bodies, every thought in their minds, every beat of their hearts was devoted to the art of violence. They did not use weapons. They were weapons. Living, thinking, adapting weapons that could never be turned off. And now those weapons were asking for targets. Looked at her confident smile, at the light in her eyes, and he saw the future of the galaxy. The humans would not stop. They would never stop. They would spread across the stars like fire across dry grass, fighting and conquering and expanding until there was nothing left to fight. And they would watch it happen. They would provide the ships and the technology and the star charts because what choice did they have? The humans were too strong now, too numerous, too integrated into Dominion society. Trying to stop them would mean war, and they had just learned what happened to species that went to war with humans. The Dominion had not found a weapon. They had not even found an ally. They had found a predator, the most successful predator the galaxy had ever seen, and they had given it the keys to the universe. The Confederacy said, "Their treaty expires in 3 years. We've already begun planning." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. The humans had arrived on the galactic stage as primitive creatures who had never left their own solar system. They had been conquered, recruited, and deployed as expendable soldiers in someone else's war. Now they were planning the next war themselves. And the great conquerors of 17 star systems were simply along for the ride. Looked out at the stars one more time. He thought about that first day in orbit around Earth, when he had looked down at the blue planet and seen nothing but another easy conquest. He had been so sure of himself then, so confident. He had not understood what humans were. He understood now. And understanding brought no comfort at all.